This is Property Matters, a weekly catch-up on the world of property supported by Fairview International Property Consultancy and auctionproperty.co.uk. And we're live every week on YouTube, Facebook, LinkedIn and our website, propertymatterstv.co.uk. If you're watching on the website, leave us a Google review, and if you're watching on the socials, get involved in the conversation below wherever you're watching us. Also, of course, if you'd like to email us, hello@propertymatterstv.co.uk gets you through with any questions that you'd like us to discuss. A podcast version of the show is available every Monday for you to take us on the move, and it's available from the platforms you can see on the other side of the screen. So let's get into today's stories. Here's our property expert, Joe Joshi. Hi, Joe.
Hi, Paul. Hi, everybody, and welcome to yet another version of Property Matters.
And interestingly, John Lewis comes into the news. We have touched on this before, but there's a bit of an update here. They plan to become a major residential landlord. They've moved a step closer to this with the submission of a planning application to develop more than 200 residential units in Reading. The retail proposals, which are currently with Reading Borough Council for approval, consist of repurposing brownfield land, which John Lewis previously used as a delivery depot. If approved, the partnership will commit 80 million to demolish the old distribution warehouse and build 215 build-to-rent flats. The national head of real estate at RSM UK commented, John Lewis's plans to build 215 rental flats by transforming an unused distribution warehouse is a great example of revitalising brownfield land. If approved by local authorities, this initiative will help to alleviate some of the growing housing pressure in Reading by providing much needed rental housing stock, helping to tackle the UK's supply and demand imbalance. This is an interesting development, and obviously one would assume a little bit more profitable than retail probably is right now. Do you think they're trying to diversify the business into becoming a landlord?
Well, I mean, on our previous programs, we've discussed this, and I've said to you that the government and the corporation companies are going towards this direction. It's a combination of a win-win situation here, isn't it, really, Paul, when you think about it? They've got the land, so they're not out there looking for new land to build on. It's a case of sort of complying with planning applications where there is brownfield sites available. And yes, it's a great add-on for the retailer because they've got not that they haven't got a ready-made customer base, but they've now got a guaranteed customer base that is living above or beside or around their store within their territories. So, it's a guaranteed number of people that are going to be coming and buying within that store. And of course, the rental income and the yields that are returned is obviously a great return on their land investment that they've got. So, I can't see what there isn't to like about this from John Lewis's point of view, or from pretty much any other major retailer who has the space, the location, etc., to be able to deal with such things. And this is what's going to, this drive is what is probably driving the smaller landlords out, because these corporates committing 80 million pounds towards the development of a brownfield site into 200 plus homes, is not the kind of money that small guy has. And on top of that, the return from that, so imagine that each flat is, for the purpose of round figures, is getting £1,000. That's and 200 of those is coming through. That's £200,000 a month income over and above what else the gain the store is going to have. So I think it's a great win-win situation.
And they reportedly have found space for more than 7,000 homes across the UK, John Lewis, and they're submitting plans early next year to a number of areas for all of those homes. So, as you say, if they're all getting £1,000 per property, then it's a serious portfolio. And everybody wins, as you say, because the land was derelict anyway. They owned the land. And there was a time probably when they would have sold that to a developer, and a developer would have done it. But now they're seeing the benefit of actually holding on to it and becoming involved in that business and diversifying, because at the end of the day, retail is highly competitive, and although they are very substantially online as well, they have committed to physical stores in the past, and That's clearly not a great strategy going forward, one would suggest. And this gives them an opportunity to diversify. So they build the homes and manage that process. The council gets, 200 or 300 new homes that it wasn't expecting. Doesn't have to do a lot for it apart from to give them the plans. But a site like that, there's not going to be a lot of restriction, one would suggest, other than the fact that they've got to make sure that the roads and the access and everything is all fair and sensible. So, as you say, everybody seems to win, and one wonders where this might go. Look at Sainsbury's, Tesco, Asda, Lidl, everybody. I mean, where's this going to stop, do you think?
Well, the 15,000 homes targeted by the Labour government, and to be honest with you, if the Conservatives have woken up and smelled the coffee, they could have probably done the same thing. But the reality is that this is now a perfect scenario to also keep retail units poor. Even though that part is dying, you can't take away from the fact that there are some aspects of food shopping that just means you've got to go to the store and get it. They may not have to put as big a size of stores as they've had. On the other hand, they might have to put even bigger size stores depending on the footfall and the traffic that they get. So I just don't see where there is a loss for the retailer like John Lewis, like Tesco's, like M&S. In fact, if anything, it actually chances are that they will continue to keep those stores open, creating more employment, because all of a sudden they've got more residents, more footfall from the people that they're actually now going to be living in those areas. The council, on the other hand, are rubbing their hand in glee because they know that they've now going to get all these properties that they can actually get. And it's not just based on the Section 106 element, because previously a developer would buy, and what would kill the deal is the 106, because let's say they had, 100 properties that they could build, they might have to give 30 to the council under the housing association aspect of it. But because these are built to rent schemes, there is no argument about what they're going to give. They are just there to rent. So whether the council takes a portion of them and says, look, we got to house some homeless people in this, and that's the agreement on us giving you the planning, and you carry on doing the rest because you're not selling them on, you're going to build them to rent them. So you carry on renting them to the private sector. Unless there's a cash in there, I think that you'll find that this will be a snowball effect with pretty much all the retailers. And that doesn't just confine it to supermarkets. There's lots and lots of other retailers that take big out of town shopping facilities nowadays. So they will look at all of those people and see how they could do carpet stores, B&Q type of operations, DIY people. All of these people have lots and lots of space that they have, and now maybe don't need some of those things can be bought online, and they could reduce the size of their stores, but still maintain it and build around it. So yeah, I think it's a great scheme.
And it's very interesting how that build to rent sector has appealed to, in particular, millennials. I mean, they've experienced this through their university years very often, because that's where this really started from, building all these places to rent for university students. And of course, they've got the gym in the basement, they've got the bar social area. And one wonders whether in certain developments that those sort of features will feature in those developments, and they will appeal to those young home buyers.
Oh, definitely. I mean, all of those developments are going to feature all of the above. I can't see why it shouldn't. In fact, to the point where gyms will probably become incorporated within that, and some gym operators will take those gym spaces within the residential side, because they've got, again, a guaranteed audience. You have to remember, a lot of people go to the gym, for argument's sake, not that I do go to the gym, but a lot of people go to the gym and they register literally, day after New Year's Day, thinking, right, my New Year's resolution is going to be that I'm going to go and do this. And about a month later, they're still committed to their payments, but they actually stop going. It might be that these are the sort of things where these facilities are brought right under the nose, and can actually offer a better service. The world is the oyster as far as that's concerned.
Well, a very mixed bag this week on the show. Property transactions up 20, or the property transaction times up 23% in the last 10 years. We've talked about this quite a bit on the show. There's been a significant increase in property transaction times over the past decade. New figures from 20EA shows, according to the data in 2014, the average property turnaround time was 94 days. That figure now stands at 122 days, an increase of 23%, whilst fall-throughs have risen by 11.6 to 23,243 in this year, compared to 22,613 in 2014. This is more of a concern considering it is against a backdrop of decreasing transactions, which are 3.6% lower in 2024 compared to 2014. According to ASAP, a sales progression specialist which analysed the figures. When it comes to house prices, the data shows an overall average rise of 53.8% from 185,476 to 285,201 today. So 100 grand's gone on your house on average in the last 10 years. Semi-detached properties have seen the biggest price rise from 174,092 to 278,793. That's an increase of 60.1%. So your semi-detached has gone up 60% in 10 years, but it's going to take you nearly all of that time to buy it.
Yes, exactly, and because that's the process that we have to go through, and that's not going to slow down. I mean, there's no secret way to get that process to get faster. I mean, we, as you know, we are property auctioneers as well, and so therefore, I endorse that there is a possibility that all of that can come forward if you use the auction method of sale, because the packs are ready up front and it gives people a chance to make an informed decision to buy a property. But somehow the private treaty transactions just seem to linger on forever and a day. There are many reasons for it, many parts for it, especially if you're borrowing money, that the lender needs to sort of have almost like a double check on those things. And sometimes the same solicitor is acting for the lender and the buyer. And sometimes the lender is actually going to appoint a separate set of solicitors. And when they appoint a separate set of solicitors, then they're going to take another set of time. So that's why it takes forever for that transaction, which is quite sad, really, that in a modern world where things can be bought and sold online in a snap second, we can't actually sort out the housing situation.
Yeah, I mean, I just worked it out. 122 days is 17 weeks. I mean, that's getting on for half a year.
Yeah, it's ludicrous. The idea of saying, okay, well, I'm going to do this, is not inspiring for people in order to get that transaction moving. But like I said, it's not the buyer themselves that causes that issue. It's the system, and that system means that the lawyer will say it's not my fault, but it's the lender, and the lender will say, well, it's not my fault because the lawyer hasn't done it. So basically, it's a no fault. Yeah, in this case, it's a no fault sale, let alone a no fault eviction that we talked about previously. This is everybody else's fault but their own.
I wonder what extent the pandemic has had an effect on this, because you still hear companies say to you, oh, it's because of the pandemic and, everyone's working from home. Well, I mean, most companies seem to have sorted out how to make that happen. And there is specific software out there that can be put onto people's laptops and computers at home so that it works exactly like it used to when they're in the office. So I think I'd love to see what the figures are like, say, from 2020, how they've moved out from 2020 onwards as opposed to from 2014, because one would suspect that there's been quite a lot more delay in the process because everybody is quite conveniently resting on the fact that everyone's working from home. What's your thoughts?
It's a massive excuse. It existed before the pandemic, and it's just pandemic now. It's just another excuse of why things are delayed. It's always someone else's fault, Paul. It's always some other circumstance's fault. Nothing we could do about it because we're not in control about in there. The only things we can manage are the things that we're in control of. Anything that is not in our control is always going to be someone else's fault. And sadly, that's what takes up the time. In this situation, it's not the pandemic. The pandemic, I mean, this was the same story before the pandemic. It wasn't as if it was so fast prior to the pandemic that you can move your house in 7 days or 7 weeks or whatever it was. It was still the same sort of time span. I don't think it's an excuse.
Interestingly, just looking at those figures, we talked about semi-detached properties going up 60% to 278,000, nearly 279,000. In contrast to that, the one-bedroom properties have seen the lowest increase at just 8%, from 180,000 to 195,000. This is in stark contrast to four-bedroom homes, which have risen by just 48% compared to the 60% on semi-detached, and they're now at 508,000 in 2024, whereas they were 342,000 in 2014. So those one-bedroom flats still, well, you could argue now, from an 8% increase in 10 years, damn good value.
Well, yes, it is damn good value, but of course, the number of people that can afford those one bedroom, see, it's the start of the ladder, isn't it? So you've got to get incentives in there for first time buyers to get onto those first time homes, be it the flats, etc. The reason why the semi detached are most popular is that even the detached that are built in today's modern times are normally about a hairline between the property next door. Whereas the semi-detached properties normally had a benefit of a driveway or a garage to the side, which then offered scope for some sort of extension or development above and around the property, which is why they're probably the most desirable, because they offer them more flexibility as a home than they do than the detached ones do. So if you go into a modern development nowadays, you'll find that it's a very nice estate house, but it's 2.4 cars on the outside, if you're lucky, normally a car or two, and a hairline between your neighbours, and that conjures up detached. But actually, you've maximised all the floor space and foot space on the property, be it on the ground level first, and perhaps even in the loft. And you actually lose a loft because they normally put another room in the loft now in order to provide the appropriate space that is required. Whereas a semi-detached property, in my opinion, has always been a good buy, because it offers the scope to still go into the loft area to the side and above, and then wrap it around the property. So there's lots of growth there.
Interestingly, when you look at the regional variations, the southwest has had the biggest rise over those 10 years. So if you live down there, you've made the most money, 246,000 up to 361, a rise of nearly 47%, whereas Scotland and the northeast have seen the lowest rises, just 10%. So much for the old levelling up. They say that there are a multitude of influences that have affected the market over the last 10 years, but the post-COVID bounce, largely thanks to the stamp duty holiday, was the pinnacle moment. It had a major impact on the type of property that people bought, including flexibility on location due to home working phenomenon, resulting in the price increases on the outskirts of major cities. It also meant that agents saw a number of operational changes, leading to more outsourcing as businesses scaled up and down to meet demand, which in turn helped our businesses grow. So it's interesting, isn't it, that the COVID influence has had a major impact on the housing market, not least, of course, the stamp duty holiday boosting the prices and the activity, but then also changing the way that we buy homes.
Well, we haven't seen the change the process that we buy homes, because that's still as disastrous as ever. But the thought process of the type of homes and why we're buying those particular types and where those locations are perhaps have changed, and they've changed based on some of the COVID element, some of job element, hybrid working, because they need the space at home. You remember we did the whole programs on the race for space when people were legging it out of the city out into the countryside, because they found that they had more space, they could build more. They didn't, in a flat in London, you were having a dinner at the same place as you having your study and your laptop and everything else was going on. So there's a whole change in mindset about that, but that doesn't mean to say that there has been a change in the actual system to improve time scale for buying a new home.
And interestingly, the fall through rate was 21% back in 2014. Now it's 24%. So more homes are falling through. I guess that's a sign of the times in terms of financial pressures, perhaps. Do you think, or is there more to it?
Combination of financial, combination of personal circumstances, combination of rethink. People panicked and bought and did a lot of things around the COVID, thinking that was the right thing to do, and now they changed their mind. So fall through rates. I mean, most agents always work on a 50% fall through. So we've got 100 sales together. 50 of them are not going to go anywhere. It's about throwing as much mud against the wall. Some of it will stick and some of it will fall. And So I think that's the process that they tend to go for. But most people's mindsets are their circumstances, and more than anything else, their lifestyle. I mean, a lot of the younger people that originally sort of legged it out of the town are now back in the town because they want to be amongst the others. That's their networking. That's the way they work.
Final story this week, according to research by Empowered Mortgages, following a freedom of information request to the Financial Conduct Authority on arrears and age brackets, around 115,000 borrowers have missed at least 2 mortgage payments. Within that, around 58,000, nearly 59,000 are over 50 years old, equivalent to around 51% of homeowners who've missed mortgage payments. Research also found that 21,506 homeowners aged 51 to 56 were at least 2 months in arrears, which was the highest of any age bracket. Borrowers aged 61 to 65 had the highest proportion of those in 2 months or more arrears, with 2.4% of borrowers in this group falling into arrears. This was followed by those 66 to 70, who had 2.35%, while it was 1.87% for the 56 to 60 bracket. So why do we think the old ones are in arrears suddenly, Joe? What's going on?
Well, they probably thought, we're on exit route. Doesn't really matter now. We're the old ones, and so therefore, they can come and get us, and that's what's going to happen. No, I think it's more to the point about just circumstances, Paul. Some people are not working as much as they perhaps could or want to anymore, or even have the facilities of the jobs for them to be accommodated with and bring in an income. Second part, of course, is the cost of living went absolutely drastic over the last couple of years. We know that it's caused nothing but mayhem. Your mortgage and your running cost of your utilities was equivalent, if not more. So an average household was having to find £1,200 a month more suddenly. So if you've got £1,000 coming, all of a sudden you've got to find £2,400 just to exist. And so it's like everything, something was going to give. And in that case, it's been, in some cases, a couple of months in arrears on the mortgages. They don't like it. It's not good for the credit. But the reality is that it's also equally not good for your well-being when you're literally living from hand to mouth and not getting anywhere. So I think those are probably the main reasons why such things happen. I'm sure it won't happen for long, especially with that group of people, because they are very conscious about having a roof over their head and being home. Don't want to be homeless at that time. But it's just one way of trying to rob from Paul to pay Peter.
Yeah, they're suggesting it's a bit of a pincer movement because not only is their income less stable potentially at that age, because tends to be taking if you're given early retirement, or if you're let go in your mid-50s, then you're going to probably find a job that's not quite the same amount of income as the one you had throughout your big career. And suggesting that that they have less consistent earnings and often rely more on pension income because they've obviously looked after their pension during their career. And so that's starting to come through. But I guess also the fact that during difficult times such as 2008, etc., they've probably extended the term well into their 60s.
That's right. I mean, it's a combination of circumstances and what they want to do. But I don't think they intentionally want to be in that place. But so the cost of living really did hit a lot of people. I know loads of people that are still suffering with that because all of a sudden they had to find. And nobody wants to be homeless. Nobody wants to go down that road. It's not where they want to be. But circumstances that are beyond their control sometimes take them to that sort of level. And this is probably where the oldie goldies have got to. I mean, imagine the riot they've had just with the fuel. the heating cost of, that they're going to lose this winter. I mean, it might only be a couple of £100, but every penny counts, doesn't it? Really. So I think those are the reasons why that has happened. But I'm sure it won't be for long.
Yeah, they talk about the fact that many of these people are also mortgage prisoners because they're unable to switch to more competitive rates, and instead they're stuck paying higher interest on standard variable rates because they can't get these 5-year deals because they don't have enough time left to pay it.
That's right. It's the time, as I said right at the beginning. It's about the age time. They're on the exit route of life, and lenders aren't going to lend. And to make matters worse, if you've got a couple of months in arrears, you've definitely shot yourself in the foot, because no lender is going to want to touch that. They're going to think, well, if you can't afford that, you can't afford this. So it's just a sad situation to be in at that point of life. But I do understand why that could happen. And the only thing they can do is to talk to their lenders and try and work something out with them.
Yeah, it's interesting because you've also got the those that were on endowment mortgages. There'll still be a few of those coming to the end of their term around about now, I guess. That's another one. And those, of course, who were able to take money out of property and go and have a nice cruise. Now maybe this is coming to bite them on the bum again.
Well, no, I think those that have taken out money for the cruise, at least they've had a good time out of it.
True.
And if it's going to go pear shaped, then that's it. But there are lenders out there that do sort of secured lending for the elderly to take all the equity. They call it equity release. And if they've done that, then they're safe as they're going to be. But so those that have not been able to do that are the ones that are now suffering, especially with the cost of living.
And I guess at that age, you get to a point where you think, well, I've got enough equity in this property. I'm not going to be out on the street. I've got 200, 300, 400,000 in this house. What are they going to do? Do you think there's an element of that, perhaps?
Of course there is. There is. Yeah, there's an element of that, but also an element of that saying, okay, well, if I have to sell up, I can go and buy myself another property and not have the hassle. It's just, trying to make those decisions. And those decisions could be incorporated around family, Paul, so they might not be in a position to sort of pack their bags and go, because they're at an age and time, and they may have some ailments, disabilities, other scenarios that allows them to be closer to family. And so those are, decisions that they've got to make. But if they've got enough equity in the property, they shouldn't have any fear.
And on that note, we must leave it there for this week. Thanks for watching Property Matters. We'll be back with another one very soon.